Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the session on lookups and data validation. So, one of the best things about us as human beings is the fact that we are all different. However, when it comes to data, that can be the biggest problem. Hopefully, you can see my spreadsheet, and one of the problems, for example, would be how somebody might enter USA or UK. Some would put UK, some might put United Kingdom, some might put GB or Great Britain, some might just put England. And then when it comes to analysing the data, we have a problem. Because if I wanted to know how much we'd spent on freight shipping to the UK, I would need to go through and check for each of those different variations. So one of the things we can do is try to tie down what people can put in cells. By default, you can enter whatever you want in a cell. So what I want to do is I want to set up this table to try and restrict what people can enter into it. So the first thing is customer. If they misspell customer, then I'm not going to be able to analyze on customer because I won't get those misspelling options. So I've got a new tab here called validated orders. And in here, I want to give them a choice of customers. And to do that, I'm going to create a drop-down list. So the first thing I need to do is put together that list. And I've done that on this tab called lists. So this is a list of all of the customers that appear in that initial orders table. So in here, I'm going to give them a drop-down list to choose a customer. And we do that using data validation. You can find data validation on the data ribbon, and it's under data tools, and it's this option here. So the first thing is to select the cells where you want to have the data validation in. So if I was going to have the first 17 or 18 rows, I would select that first. In a future webinar, we'll be looking at tables and how tables can be used to automatically add data validation rules and formulas to new rows that you add at the bottom of a table. But for now, I'm just going to have a single cell and click on data validation. So, excuse me, this is my data validation box. There are 3 tabs at the top. The first one is settings, and as you can see, it's set to allow any value. On the drop down, I can restrict the type of data that can go into that cell to any one of these options. So the one I was talking about was a list. I want to give them a list that they can choose from. On the right hand side, I can choose to allow them to put blanks in other words, to put nothing in at all. If I untick that, they will have to put something in that cell when they leave it, or it will throw up an error. If they try to put anything that's not in my list, it will also give them an error. So I'm going to leave it so that they can leave it blank for now, but I probably want to untick that for this particular field. If we're going to take an order, we really need to know who the customer is. In cell drop down just means I will get a little arrow here which I can click on to see the list of options. And the other thing I need to do is select the source. So where is this list that they're going to be given? So I'm going to click into source, go to lists, and select everything in my list. And you can see it's put in the name of the worksheet, it's put in the first reference with the dollar signs and the last reference with the dollar signs. So that list is now fixed. Click OK. And I can now see that when I click in here, I've got my drop down arrow and I've got a list of customers that I can select from. If I try to put anything in there that's not in my list, it will give me an error message. If I want to add to the list, so if I wanted to add something at the bottom, I can do that, but I would need to go back to my data validation. I would need to go back to my selections and I would need to amend the list here and click OK. And now if I wanted to put my name in, it's in the list, so I can enter it in there. I'm going to go back to data validation because the error message that we got is what you see here. So we can have an input message. That's what's displayed when you click on the cell. So I can give it a title. And I can give a message. If I click OK now, when I click on it, I get the title and my description underneath. The last tab is the error alert. So this is a choice between 3 different types of alert. Stop is the default. Stop will not let them proceed with whatever they've put in there if it's not in the list. So if I try to put something in here now and come away from it, it doesn't match the data validation restrictions. I can retry or cancel. Retry will ask me to enter something else. Cancel will take it back to what was in there previously. So stop does just that. It stops them from putting anything in there. But we got the default, so I could give it a title. And I can give it an error message. Now if I try to do the same thing, I get my error message rather than that random one that Microsoft created. So title, no matching customer, and the message is please select one of the customers from the list. And I can again retry or cancel. The other options we've got are warning. So that's the exclamation mark inside the orange triangle. Still got a title and error message. Warning will tell them that they're about to do something they shouldn't be doing, but it will then let them do it. So if I say OK now, and I put in Fred, please select one of the customers from the list. Do you want to continue? So yes, I can put Fred in. No would allow me to go back and change it. The other type is information, and all that does is just tell them that they're about to do something they shouldn't be doing. So if I put in James, please select one of the customers from the list. OK, and the message goes away. So they're my different types of errors. And depending on what the message is, I can choose whether I will let them put some information in there that shouldn't be in the list, or whether I prevent it completely with stop. So I'm going to leave this set to stop, and I'm going to select a valid customer. Same thing with employee. So I can go in here, I can go to settings, I can choose list, and then all I need to do is tell it where my list is. So again, it's on lists. These are my employees. Click OK. I've now got a list of employees to choose from. Order ID. If I have a look at the order ID, it's a whole number. And one of my options is to make sure that it is only a whole number that's entered. I can then say how I want that whole number to be controlled. So I'm going to say it's got to be greater than 0, because we don't want an invoice number that is 0. Now if I try to type in -1, it's going to give me that error, and I can retry or cancel. Again, I could go in, I could give it a input message, and I could change the error message, but I'll leave it at that for now. Order date. Data validation, one of the options we've got is date. And again, I can select a date range, or I can see it's got to be greater than, and presumably what we would want is a start date of today, so I could enter it in there. If it was a date that changed, then I could select a cell with that date in on my spreadsheet. So I can add dates. Courier, if I have a look at my lists, I've not done a courier yet. And I've done this so that I can show you the quickest way to make a list of couriers or anything else. I'll do ship country as well. So on my orders table, I've got my courier column. All I'm going to do is select the entire column and copy it, go to my lists and paste it in there. So this has got lots of duplicate values. Back on my data ribbon, I can use this option here to remove duplicates. So I've only got the one column selected. I can click remove duplicates. I've said it's got a header so it won't count this in the list, and then I can click OK. It's removed 827 duplicate values. There are 4 unique values remaining. One of the downsides of this is you have no idea what it's going to remove until it's done it. So if you wanted to check what was going to be removed first, what were duplicates, which one was going to be removed, then on your home ribbon you do have conditional formatting that will allow you to highlight duplicate values, and you can check them in advance. I'm going to do the same thing for ship country. So back to orders, select the entire column and copy, back to my lists, click on the first cell and paste, and then back to my data ribbon and remove duplicates. Again, I've got a header, click OK, and it will now remove any duplicates, and I now have a unique list. So back to my validated orders. In here, I'm going to do my data validation, choose a list, set the source, which is going to be this section here, and I'll do the same thing for country, data validation, select list, click source, and select my list of references. If I click on the arrow here, you will notice that this is not in alphabetical order. It will come through in exactly the same order that you have it in the list. So if I wanted to put these in alphabetical order, I would click on it and I would click the sorting option. Then when I go back and click on the drop down arrow, it's now in alphabetical order. So the order for my list is determined by the order from my lookups. So this is the table I used. That's how it will appear on my drop downs. And that's data validation. Really useful for making sure that everything that's entered meets a certain criteria, which when you start doing pivot tables and looking at how much you spent with a particular courier, you need to be sure that everything in that column is picked up correctly, spelt correctly, no extra spaces at the end. That's one of the ones I see quite frequently because people are touch typing and not really paying attention to what they're doing. At the end of each word, they press space automatically. Then you have some of these with an extra space. You can't see it. It's not obvious, but it is different from this next option here. And that starts causing problems when you come to doing your analysis. So that's my data validation and creating simple lists. As I say, we will look at how we can maintain these lists so it automatically picks up new entries that we add to them, and also how it automatically picks up the data validation on new rows when you enter new data as part of a future webinar. The other part of today's session is all about lookups. So lookups are a way of bringing information back based on something that you give a function. So I've got a quick demonstration here where I've got order number, order date, the company reference, the company name, the initial value, the VAT, and then the total value of the invoice. What I want to be able to do is put in an order number. Customer rings up, they give me an order number. I want it to bring back the company name, the invoice total, and how much discount they got. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a lookup to bring back my company name. Now, before we start, there are a few things I need to make sure I have for my lookup function. The first is I must be using a unique value. So something like order number is perfect. I can't use company name because hopefully we've got orders from multiple times from the same companies. So I've got Wilson Garages here, here, and here. If I do a lookup, it will find the first matching value. So if I do it from top to bottom, it will only ever bring me back this row of data. If I do it bottom to top, it will only ever bring back this row of data. So that's the first thing you need to know about lookups. You must have a unique value for looking up. In most cases. We'll look at a slightly different one towards the end. The second thing is the lookup that most people are familiar with is one called VLOOKUP. So if I click in here and start typing my equals and then the name of the function, you'll see VLOOKUP appear. There are other lookups. V stands for vertical, and it's why most people have heard of VLOOKUP and not many people have heard of HLOOKUP. H standing for horizontal, because most of the time our data is organized in columns going down, not in rows going across. But if you did need to search through a row rather than a column and bring back a column, then you can use HLOOKUP instead, and it works in exactly the same way. There is also a new function called XLOOKUP, which we will be looking at because it is preferable to either V or H. But we'll start with VLOOKUP because it is simple and fairly easy to understand. And then we'll look at why XLOOKUP is now a preferred option. So equals VL, and then I can hit the tab. If you remember with our functions, they will have open and close brackets, and then we've got the different sections that Excel needs from you separated out by commas. Anything in square brackets is optional. That being said, if you don't enter it, it will go to the default. And if you don't know what the default is, that can cause you trouble. So we're going to enter the lookup value, the table array, the column index number, and the range lookup. Now, forgetting about Excel, if a customer rings up and says my order number is 1401, I would look down the order number column for 1401. Then I would go across to the company name, and that would tell me who the company was. That's exactly what we're going to do with Excel. So the first thing is the lookup value. What is it that decides which one of these rows we need to get information from? And that's going to be whatever I enter in this order number. So that is my lookup value, the unique value I'm going to use to decide which record or row I want to get my information back from. Comma moves me on to table array. Your lookup value must be in the first column of your table array, or row if you're doing an HLOOKUP. So in other words, the first column I select is going to be where it looks for this lookup value. Now, fortunately, I've put it at the start, which means that I will be looking up from this column here, which is the first column, and therefore where it will look for 1401, my order number. And I need to go at least across to where I want to bring my information back from, which is company name. But as I know I want the invoice total as well, I'm going to select the whole of this table. And because the table is not going to move, and I might want to copy this elsewhere, I'm going to press F4 to fix the row and column references. So I've made it an absolute reference. It will always look at A2 down to G11. This brings in the first problem with VLOOKUPs. Apart from having to have a unique value, you can't get any data that is left of where your unique value sits. So if I was looking for company reference, for example, that would have to be my first column, but I can't then select anything to the left of it, including order date, because that would then become my first column, and it would look for my company reference in that column instead. So on a VLOOKUP, you can only take data to the right. On an HLOOKUP, you can only take values underneath. So it has to be the first row that you look at, like in this case, it's the first column. So that's my table array. Where am I going to find the data? Comma takes me to column index number. As you can see, my table is all of this information. My lookup is going to be in the first column, but which column do I want back? I want the company name. Now the key thing here is it says index number. So what it does is it looks at the range of cells you've given it, and it labels the columns 1, 2, 3, company name would be 4, 5, 6, 7. So company name, the information I want back is in column number 4. So my column index number, the data I want to get back, is in the 4th column. So it will look up my lookup value in column 1. It knows how far my data extends to the right, and then it labels the columns or numbers the columns 1 through to X. And this is the column that I want back, the fourth column, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it will find the order number, go across to the column 4 and bring back the information from there. Now I'm going to hit comma again and it will give me my range lookup. Remember I said this is optional because it's in square brackets. I've got two choices. I can have true or false. It tells me there that true is an approximate match. The values in the first column of the table must be sorted in ascending order. So if it's numeric data, it needs to be in ascending order, and then it will find the closest approximate value. So if I put in 1400.5, doesn't exist in this list, it would find the closest value, and it's always the next value. The one I want is exact match. In other words, if it can't find my order number, I want it to tell me and not find the nearest order number, because that generally means there's a problem. So exact match is false, or you can also use 0. Approximate match is 1 or true. And that's it, I'm done. I can close the brackets, press enter, and it now tells me that my order number 1401 is Patel Industries. I change the number. It will update the company name for me. I put in a number that doesn't exist, and I get this #NA. We've looked at errors in the past, and this is one of the useful errors that I can live with, because what that is doing is it's saying that the number or the lookup value I've put in here is not applicable. It can't find it in this list. It doesn't look very pretty having #NA in there, and you could use an if. In fact, there's various functions you can use because there is also one called if NA. So in other words, if it comes back with a #NA error, I can do something different. But we won't bother with that because there is an alternative we're going to look at instead. So as long as I put in a valid order number, it will come out with the company name. I want to do the same thing for invoice total. I want to use the order number to find the right row and then bring back the last column. If I have a look at this, the only thing that's going to change in here is which column of data I'm bringing back. So I'm going to copy that, hit tab to move across to invoice total, paste it in there, Control V, and all I'm going to do is change which column of data I'm bringing back. I want the 7th column, which is the last column here, and that will give me my invoice total. And of course I can go in and I can change the format to make it look pretty. Its currency, let's give it a £, commas for thousands, and the decimal place. So I applied a discount for my companies based on how much they spent. If they spent between £0 and £500, they got nothing. Between 500 and 1,000, they got 8%. Between 1,000 and 5,000, they got 12. Between 5,000 and 50,000, 18. And if they spent over 50,000, I gave them a 22% discount. I want to bring back that discount rate that applied to this invoice, which is based on this invoice number, into this cell here. So again, I'm going to use a VLOOKUP. My lookup value is going to be the invoice total. There's no point using the order number because that won't tell me how much it was. But the invoice total will change with the order number, and it's this value I need to find in my discount table because it's this that's going to tell me how much discount they got. Table array, exactly the same as before. I want to look up the total of the invoice in my invoice total column and bring back my discount. So I only have 2 columns. Again, if I want to, I can fix this in case I copy it somewhere else. Column index number, there's only 2, and I want to bring back the 2nd column. The key thing now is whether I choose true or false. My invoice total is £5,235.80. That does not appear as value in my list. So I don't want exact match, because if I did, I would have to write out every value incrementing by 1 pence right up to the maximum they're ever likely to spend. So in this case, I'm going to use approximate match. Because this is an ascending order, it starts here and matches it. Is it more than 0? Yes. More than 500? Yes. More than 1,000? Yes. More than 5,000? Yes. Is it more than 50,000? No. So it stops at the point where it was greater than and goes to the 1 underneath. So 1 or 0, I can either put true or 1, press enter, and it will now give me the appropriate discount rate for the 5,000 value, which I can format as a % sign. If I put in a lower invoice number, 1406, for example, that was Patel Industries. They spent £65.26. They get no discount. If I go for a mid-range one, let's go for 1403. They got 18%. I went for a high one instead. I was looking at VAT, that's why. Let's go for 1401. They get 12%. They spent more than 1,000, but not enough to qualify for the 18%. This kind of lookup can be used to group values. For example, if you have a date of birth, you can calculate age, but maybe we don't want every single possible age from 0 to, I don't know, 110. Maybe we want children, adults, OAPs. So I could set up a table that said 0 to 18 was a child, so that would be 0, 0. 18 would become adult, and then 65, 7, or 90 probably in a few years' time, whatever the OAP pensionable age is, I can put in there, and I can put in the OAP value here. And I can use text. So I could bring back text that tells me whether that particular customer with their date of birth is a child, an adult, or an OAP. And as they age, as the years go by, children will change to adults because their date of birth will be further back in time. So you can use it for a lot of different things, and this is just one example. Now, I did say that one of the restrictions is that you can only look at values to the right. So I'm going to now have a look at how we can look at values no matter where they are, and also deal with the issue of that hash NA, where everything just goes to errors. So I'm going to do something called an X lookup instead. Let me delete this out, and in here equals XL brings me up X lookup. Does exactly the same thing as a V or H lookup, and then a little bit extra. So you can see I've got lookup value like we had before, but then instead of table array, I've got lookup array and return array. So that's the same as your table array, but split out instead. I've got an if not found. So that's replacing the is NA. If that lookup value cannot be found, what do you want to do instead? Then I've got match mode. Do I want exact, approximate, but more control? And then I've got search mode. Which direction do we want to search the data in? So we'll do each one of these as we come to it. The first is lookup value, which is the same as before. Whatever the order number is that's been entered into this cell here. Lookup array. So instead of table array, it's now saying, where can I find what you expect to be entered in there? So all I'm going to do is give it one column, that column there. Again, I can F4 to fix it. So that's where do I find the value, comma, where do I want the value back from? So in this case, I can select any column. It doesn't matter if it's left of this or right of this. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to say I want the company name back, which will be in this column here, and F4 again. Everything else is optional. But as I say, if we don't enter it, it'll do the default. And if we don't know what the default is, that can cause us problems. As we saw with the exact and approximate match, get that wrong, it can cause all sorts of issues. So the first thing is comma, if not found. If I cannot find that order number in this array, this lookup array, this column here, what do I want to put in that cell? A little message saying no matching order number. So if it can't find the order number, that's the text I will see instead. Because it's text, I put it inside the double quotes. Comma moves me on to match mode. So remember we had exact and approximate match. I've still got exact, but I now have exact match or next smaller item, which is the same as the approximate in the VLOOKUP. But I can switch it to exact match or next larger item. And I've also got a wildcard character match. So that searches based on wildcards. So I can use wildcards instead. I'm going to stick with exact match for this one, and we'll look at some of the other options when it comes to discount rate. So exact match is still 0. Comma. Before I had no choice. I had to sort it in ascending order if it was numeric. But now I can search from top to bottom or bottom to top. So I can have this in ascending or descending order, doesn't matter which. I'm going to stick with first to last. So that's exactly what we did before in the VLOOKUP. We gave it the lookup value. We gave it a table array and a column number. Now we're telling it what column to look for the lookup value, what column of data we want back. We're saying what happens if they can't find a match. That won't be relevant if our match mode is approximate, because it'll find the closest value. But in this case, we can give it some text. Match mode is exact, so if it's not an exact match, I don't want to find something near my order number, I only want the exact order number, and we're searching from top to bottom. If I press enter now, it will tell me there is no matching order number for the order number that I've entered. Make that a bit bigger. But if I change this to a valid order number, it will then come back with the company name. So that gets rid of a lot of limitations and restrictions with VLOOKUPs. It stops people having to drag the column that's got their unique value to the start of their data to be able to use all of the different fields. XLOOKUP is now a much better function to use than V or HLOOKUP, and you can use it to also control the match mode. So if I do the same thing on discount rate, I'll replace that with XLOOKUP. Lookup value is going to be my invoice total. Lookup array is going to be my array of discount values. My return array is going to be the discount rate. If not found, I'm going to ignore by just hitting the comma again, so I don't have to put anything in there. Now, the one I used before was exact match or next smaller item. So I'll use that first of all. You'll see that's a -1. And we'll search from top to bottom. So that gives me the same thing as before. It goes through and matches against the different values. It's got nothing between these two values, so it goes to the next smaller value. If I change that, so instead of my match mode being the -1, if I use +1, it will now find me the next highest value. So it doesn't match with 1,000. We'll skip to the next value up, which is the 5,000, and gives them 18%. So that's my lookups. I've given you an example here where we're using it based on a number that we're given for the order number to pull back some information. On my next tab, I've got order details. So these are products that have been ordered, unit price, quantity, how much it cost, against each order ID. So 2 items appeared on this order ID. But I have no idea who that customer was, where we shipped it to, or any of that information. My order ID links with my orders. So it's this order ID here that matches with my order details here. So 10248, 10248, that customer, that employee went to that country with that courier. I want to bring those details into this table. So I'm going to have customer, employee, and I'll just do country. And I'll take the square brackets off the end of there. So equals X lookup. Lookup value. So what's my unique value that I'm going to use to find the customer? It's going to be my order ID. Now, when I say unique value, it doesn't need to be unique in this table. It needs to be unique in where I'm looking up the value. So it is unique in my orders table. At least it wouldn't matter if it wasn't. Lookup array. So where will I find that order ID? Well, it's going to be on the orders, and I'm going to take the whole of column A so that anything that's added to this is also included. So that's my lookup array. It also saves me having to fix the top and bottom rows of my table. Comma, what column do I want back? I said I wanted my customer. I've just done the wrong thing there. I don't want that one. What I want is order ID. Except that's now in the way. There we go, column C. My matched value will be customers. So I'm looking up my order ID, I'm bringing customers back. I couldn't do that with a VLOOKUP because I could only take anything to the right of the order ID. If not found, I'm just going to leave it blank. Two double quotes will leave it empty. Match mode, only want an exact match. Search direction, first to last is fine, it shouldn't matter. Press enter, and there's my customer. Click back on it and double click. It will then do it for every single entry in this table, right down to the bottom. Same thing for employee. I want exactly the same thing back. So I can just copy, paste, except instead of column A, what I'm going to want is column B. So I can just go in here, change that to a B, because it's the values that I'm getting back that I want to change. And the last one is country. So again, I can paste in there and just go in and change that. And my country is in column I. So I can go back in here and change that to column I. Select them both, double click, and now I've brought in the data that's in a separate table into this table here. So now, as well as the product and the unit price and the quantity and how much each item was, I can see who the customer was, who the employee was, and what country it was sent to. So lookups are a really good way of bringing information in from disparate tables. The whole purpose of databases is to avoid duplication. So when we go to normal forms and we separate out data, we have everything that relates to something in a different table. So my orders and their shipping information, if they were in validated orders, would need to be, if they were in order details, would be repeated. And that's what we try to avoid. So I would have an employee table, a customer table, a product table, and then link them all with unique values. In this case, the order ID links the product with the customer, the employee that sold it, and the country that it was shipped to. And I can join those back together to do some analysis. So now I can see, for example, how many items or what quantity, what value of particular products were sold by each employee. And we'll look at how you can do that really easily in one of the upcoming webinars on pivot tables, which also covers tables which will help you manage data validation and the formulas that you add when you add new rows of data. And that's it for this session. If you've got any questions, do feel free to hang back and ask them. If not, thank you for your time. If you could please fill out our feedback form. I think Rebecca has or will be dropping that link into the chat, and we'll get the video made available to you, and last week's if you are still waiting on that in due course. Thank you for your time.